Guys, can you hear me? Oh, I'm good?
Yeah.
First of all, quick little spiel. Thank you guys for joining us this morning. Happy Friday. And congratulations, first of all and foremost, to Raj, who has put on a phenomenal week. I know there is a lot of logistics and everything that goes into planning all these things, but from a release party to dinner, Friday after Thursday night football. It's interesting to see you guys here Friday morning. So welcome to Workbox. Just really quickly, this is in the vein of what we love to do, which is just connecting with individuals, especially those that could be adventurers in tech space, and these are the types of things that are really great. Especially this topic discussion we have today, the gaps that we're trying to help with, and we're benchmark as well in the space, the funding venture capital world as well. So really excited today. Looking forward to hearing about this discussion. But again, welcome to the space. This is one of our 4 that we have here in Chicago. Potentially soon to be 5 in the next coming months. So we also have open up in Salt Lake and Columbus and Minneapolis. So if you guys are there or know people there, definitely feel free to swing by and check it out. But we're so excited to have you guys here. Again, congratulations to Raj and everything that's been going on this week. I will toss it over to Whitney, who is going to introduce her panelists today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hello, welcome to Friday of Hype Week. The first of many, right? I think let's first off just give it up to Raj for throwing together this incredible to celebrate startups and the wonderful work that they're doing. So thank you, Raj, for bringing this all together. I'd also love to thank our partner Akeva for making this week come to life in such a spectacular way, and for being a great partner and great people. If scalable, bulletproof development is on your horizon or the horizon of your portfolio companies, give Akeva a conversation. I think it's worth reaching out. So also, let's thank Stella, our funds, for bringing us an incredible spread of breakfast. I guess. And thanks to Workbox for hosting us. It's a beautiful space. Love the natural light. Let's get some work done. All right, so we have an incredible panel for you this morning. First, I want to set the context for why we're having this conversation. So, after the George Floyd murder in 2020, countless funds committed to investing more in underrepresented founders. But June of this year, the Supreme Court actually overturned affirmative action, and we saw a cascade of lawsuits against companies, against universities, specifically aimed at their DEI policies. The Fearless Fund is currently being sued because of their directive to invest solely in Black women founders. So, what does that mean for startups who are going after funding? Do they need to change their approach? To answer those questions and more, we have 3 incredible panelists. These panelists have a few things in common. First, they are passionate about creating a more socially just world, and they're actively doing something about it. Second, they are all startup hype man portfolio companies that trusted us to help them with their pitch. So beyond being our benefactor, Stella Ashalou is the founder of WeSolv, where they're solving the diversity challenges with tech. They have raised close to $2 million with about $100,000 in grants. Luisa Castellanos is the founder of Science on Call, which has raised $4 million to date, plus $35,000 in prizes and grants. Brooke McKean, closest to me, is the founder of Reach, co-founder of Reach, which is a spin-off of Chicago Scholars. They have raised over $500,000 in grants and competition wins, including beating over 1,000 other applicants in the hyper-competitive South by Southwest Pitch and Tools competition. It's incredible. To lead us through this extremely timely conversation about funding in a post-affirmative action world, we have Cindu Thomas-George, the founder and CEO of Shakti Diversity and Equity Training. Cindu designs and leads professional development programs that emphasize inclusion, equity, anti-racism, and intercultural intelligence. She's the co-founder of the Chicago Women's Leadership Accelerator, which is developing, it's a conference developing increasing representation of women in leadership roles. So, this conversation could not be in better hands at this point, so without further ado, I'll hand it over to Cindu.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I wanted to just start by setting the context of this conversation, and then I'm not going to talk that much in practice. So this really came about because of the lawsuit against Fearless Funds, which luckily is no longer a lawsuit. Just 2 days ago, it was thrown out by a judge in Atlanta. But the lawsuit was claiming that there was a violation of law and that Fearless Funds was enacting reverse racism because they really were focused on funding women of color specifically. And this is just one example of the increasing fear and threats that companies are experiencing and facing due to DEI and equity programming. Because of the Supreme Court ruling against affirmative action that was really intended for about race-based college admissions. And so the notion that efforts to further inclusify and diversify and create equity is taking something away from dominant identity groups like white men and amplifying division in this country. I'm sure you've heard before, DEI is divisive. The reality is that's a strategic tactic that was cooked up in some think tank. It's a manufactured idea, but it's been really successful in scaring organizations from toning down and even eliminating their DEI funding, right? So the notion that DEI is divisive is actually sticking, unfortunately, in some places, and it's reversing a lot of the DEI progress that we've seen in recent years. And women and people of color in the venture ecosystem, they face an uphill battle when it comes to making relationships, getting at the decision-making tables, having perceived credibility, and ultimately getting that funding. But DEI initiatives and equity funding is essential. It's essential to closing those gaps and creating sustainable progress. And so we're going to talk today a little bit about how the attack and the criticism and the scrutiny on DEI is affecting women across racial groups that are founders and funders in the venture ecosystem. So without further ado, I'm going to ask everyone to just quickly introduce yourself and why you decided to accept Raj's invitation to be on the stage today.
Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm Brooke McKean. I am co-CEO of Reach Pathways and President of Chicago Scholars. And I accepted this invitation because affirmative action hasn't even all that well, and it's somehow controversial. And there's a need to talk about these issues and the inequity that prevents women and people of color from accessing opportunity.
Hi everyone, my name is Stella Ashalou. I'm the founder and CEO of WeSolv and also currently the managing director of Fixed Star Fund. I accepted this invitation because I think this is a really, really important conversation, something that is very personal to me as well, obviously, as a Black woman, and something that I think is really important to have more conversation and dialogue in order to actually take the actions necessary to create change.
Hi, I'm Luisa Castellanos. I'm the co-founder and COO of Science on Call. We're a support platform for restaurants. We launched in June of 2020. I decided to be on this panel, as being kind of my first startup and first time raising money. There was a lot of things I didn't know about the industry and differences that I might face. And so I think it's really important that I speak up for other women of color who are in the same position as me to be able to achieve great things.
Thank you. So we're going to kick it off with our first question. We're all women on the stage, but we have various identities. But one thing that we have in common is that we share the minoritized identity of being a woman, and women have been minoritized in the workplace and society. We still continue to experience a wage gap. We are underrepresented in leadership, and women founders specifically continue to experience inequity when it comes to access, opportunities, and funding. In fact, women only receive about 10% of all VC dollars. So my question is, how does this statistic impact your lived experience as a women founder, And or what's one challenge that you've experienced as a woman founder when it comes to raising funds and making relationships with venture capital and private equity firms?
Yeah, that's what is a challenge. Like, I don't even know where to start. As you all can see, not only am I a woman, I'm also a Black woman. So, in full transparency, a lot of the challenges that I face, it is sometimes unclear whether those challenges are directly tied to me being a woman or directly tied to me being Black, most oftentimes both. But I can give some specific examples. These are things that I always say are going to be for the book, but I see you're recording, so this will be for the book and this recording. But when I was in Texas, I remember having a conversation with an investor, and her telling me that she doesn't invest. Most of her portfolio are underrepresented founders or women, but she doesn't invest in them because it's the right thing to do or for any altruistic reason or because they're just such great companies. She invests in them because she knows they're going to have a harder time raising capital and therefore she can get a better deal. She said this to me in front of someone. I've had investors say things like, oh, your product commands, a high price point, why do you have to go out and raise? If you could just lower burn, perhaps you could get on government assistance to be able to, and obviously it took me like an hour to understand that government assistance that she meant food stamps. I don't think those are the types of conversations that many of my white male peers are having. So those are some of the just high level, really like egregious things. But in general, just having access in the community and knowing the players who could help support me in raising capital were just some of the challenges that I personally face.
Yeah, I would say for me, I have a little bit of a different experience. So my CEO is a white male, and we fundraise together. And I think it's pretty unorthodox to have two founders at the table for fundraising conversations, but it was always very important to Andy, my co-founder, that I'm there and I'm participating and I'm part of the business. I have a very important role in the business, and I know that I do because he's given me that opportunity. And any conversation we have with investors where they're asking him a question specifically or just like looking at him or just responding to him, like that immediately throws them out of the conversation. Like he has over and over stood up for me since day one as being important to this company, and our investors understand that. And it took me a while to really connect because, to be honest, they're all white males for the most part, except for one fund. But we sometimes don't always connect with people who are different from us. But I've genuinely felt like I'm understood by these folks, but it took a long time to get there. And over and over throughout these conversations, I think we've had probably over 100 conversations with investors, and I can count on like one hand the amount of times that I felt like this is someone I connect with or that I can have a relationship with. And that's tough as a founder because like you're basically married to this person for the next 7 years, and you need to be able to go to them and during tough times, and I haven't always felt that way. So I think that's a hurdle that, it doesn't matter, who or what you are, but you need to be able to be comfortable with the people who are part of your company.
So, my experience is that women and people of color in this space are over-programmed. Everyone wants to help bestow their knowledge upon us, but no one wants to write the check. And I personally come to it with a degree of privilege from being white. And so my struggle is often at that intersectionality of I grew up very working class. So I grew up speaking construction order, not music. And so they might both be, but they're not the same language. And having to navigate that, having to navigate appearing young, although recent HBR article said that women are never the right age. You're too young, you're too old. And so I experienced a lot of, young girl, let me bestow this knowledge upon you, help you out. I'll write your check, but I will tell you what you're doing wrong. And so that's my.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience. I think it's eye-opening because unless we're in your shoes, we don't know, right? So it's good to have these conversations. Luisa, you mentioned something about all your investors are white men. And I wasn't surprised to hear that because the venture ecosystem has an overrepresentation of white men. And white men in positions of power. So white men represent about 58% of all VC investors, but they manage 93% of VC dollars. And that matters because there's something called affinity bias. And affinity bias is the idea that humans have a subconscious tendency to want to be around people that look like us, that reminds of ourselves, want to hire people, be friends with people. That doesn't make you a bad person, it just makes you human, right? It's subconscious oftentimes. But this creates a challenge for historically underrepresented startup founders. And it gives them a much harder time building relationships and receiving funding, right? Because you don't fit, you're not in their in-groups. And so my question is, how have you women navigated this bias? And what are your thoughts on what we can do to get more underrepresented investors in the room to help mitigate this bias, to create more access for minoritized founders such as yourselves? Anyone can start.
Yeah, I will say probably the biggest thing that can be done, and I'm seeing it in Chicago in some cases, is getting more underrepresented investors in the room because they're the ones who are connecting with women or people of color who they probably gravitate towards naturally, but also, building those relationships over time. It's going to take time, and starting to see it a little bit, but it's going to take time to really make a difference. But I think another thing that just any VC or investor in the community can do is just make friends with people who aren't like you. Like there are so many people in this community that I am so eternally grateful for knowing and building those relationships, and they're not like me, but I like them as people, and it's really important that you just get out there and build your network. Like I'm always blown away by when I come to an event like this, and I'm like, I know a bunch of people here, and it's just really great to feel that community.
I think I have a little bit of a different perspective on this question than the typical answer. I fundamentally think that venture capital is not a vehicle or solution that was meant to invest equitably across socioeconomic, gender, racial, people. And it is fundamentally flawed. However, it is the system that we have. And so we try to find ways to navigate and work around it. So with FitStar Funds, we specifically are trying to cut through the noise and the bias that happens in the decision-making process, right? You make decisions on who you want to fund based on, do I understand the product, what they're talking about, the problem, the customer, all of these things that are essentially based on your frame of reference, where you came from, what you understand. And it's not taking into consideration the different experiences or challenges that certain people may have had in trying to get to that current stage that they are. And so it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, or, it's, if you don't have the resources to get to a certain milestone, then you don't have the ability to get the funding, and then that becomes a cycle. As far as what to do to navigate it, it is what it is. It's really trying to understand that and figure out ways that you can be scrappy or circumvent those challenges to get to something that is perceived as traction or that type of milestone. The other piece is finding people who maybe they don't look like you, but that you can find some sort of connection. I hate to say it, but most of my investors are white males, and they saw an issue that they wanted to decide, they decided they wanted to solve or to be involved in. And whether it's because they recognize their privilege and they have the ability to do that, or whatever it might be, I had to be open to connecting with people who didn't look like me. And then when it comes to having more Black or women or minority investors in the room. I think that's so important, but that's just a small piece of the puzzle. Because the system and the way that they're trained to invest, it doesn't take into consideration a lot of those things that I mentioned. So a lot of the times, and they're oftentimes unicorns in their own right? The 1 or 2 Black or women investors in their fund or in their industry, they now are even more scrutinizing or critical of the minority businesses and founders that they are having to assess, because they don't want to be seen as, investing in a company because of, they're a woman or they're Black. So fundamentally, I think there's a lot of changes that need to happen to the venture landscape in general, but hopefully some of those things will start to create change.
Echoing Stella, I think the reality of the racial wealth gap in this country and the gender pay gap is that the majority of investors are going to continue to be white. That is where wealth is for the foreseeable future. And as much of that should change, that's not reality. And
I don't know that I have figured this out entirely, but I try to find that intersection of what is me authentically that's going to connect with the potential investors that I'm talking with. I'm a very direct person. I've experienced that investors really like that in me and that they don't expect that from me and appreciate that. And so trying to find those ways where I can still be who I am, but will be for receivers in those spaces, because trying to fake it till you make it in this space isn't going to get me where I need to.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. My next question has to do with equity, and equity is not, it's essential. You need equity before we can reach equality, and equity means a redistribution of access and resources and power, and it means giving people what they need to be successful. And this question was really inspired by a personal experience I had a month ago. I'm a DEI and anti-racism practitioner. I work with VC firms, and one of the firms that I was potentially going to work with had been vetting me for about a year, and everyone wanted me in, but the founder, the original founder, was really anti-DEI. He was one of those guys that looked at DEI as being divisive and taking away something from subgroups. And so I got to this meeting with, all of there was an offsite with the founders, and I had a whole PowerPoint presentation ready about what I was going to do. And he just started going in and yelling at me angrily, saying, I am not going to hire people of color and women because that compromises excellence. I've done it before, and these people are not as good as the white men, and I have 30 years of experience to back that up, right? And to me, and then I thought, oh my God, he thinks that equity is a substitute for excellence, and that's just not the case. It's a narrow-minded tunnel vision of what equity is. So my question is that, well, first of all, these Fifth Star funds and Fearless Fund and Chicago Blend, these are all equity practices, right? Being specific about developing minoritized, underrepresented folks who have been historically disenfranchised. That's an equity practice. Being specific about hiring and developing employees of color and women and LGBTQ plus and veterans and people with disabilities is an equity practice. There are many people who believe that this practice of equity compromises excellence. So giving opportunities to Black, Indigenous people of color and women will come at a cost, is the idea. And sometimes people look at it as a charity, right? We're doing charity work. So my question is, based off of your lived experiences of being a Latina woman, a Black woman, a white woman, what can you share with these folks who believe that equity is a compromise for excellence and a substitute for excellence? How can you help them understand that that's just not the case?
so Raj said, like I said, I can get spicy. So I would say that if your experience is that women and people of color aren't succeeding in the workplace, there's something wrong with the workplace, not the talent that's coming into it.
And there's decades of research that backs up that more diverse teams make more money. And it's been my lived experience. I have an extremely high bar of excellence for anyone that I work with, and the most effective teams have been the diverse ones that I've worked with. My co-founders are both African American men from the South Side of Chicago. Incredible stories, different from mine, different skills from mine, and by bringing all of our different lived experiences to the table, we're far more effective than if it was just one of our own individual experiences.
I mean, I echo what you said as far as there's countless data backing it up. But I think, for somebody who says women don't perform as well, I mean, there's actual stats that say women-led startups have better returns. And there's instances where having a diverse voice, or let me rephrase that to say diverse, you can't be diverse by yourself. But having a voice of somebody from a traditionally underrepresented group in the room could save many companies millions of dollars. And so I have a slide in my, deck where it's like flashing and it's like showing when, I think it was Pepsi decided that Kendall Jenner should walk up to a brigade of police officers and offer a Pepsi. Like, that was not a good move. That was costly for them. There's been so many instances where organizations have done things that if they had more diversity in the room, they could have avoided certain missteps. But honestly, to answer your question, somebody who believes that, I'm not going to waste my breath trying to change their mind. Those are not the people that WeSolv is trying to work with. Those are not the people that I think are important to really focus on. It's really the general folks who kind of share this belief that diversity is important, but maybe don't know what or how to achieve that I would rather spend my time.
Yeah, I'm really glad I'm going after both of you because there's a lot of good stuff here. But I agree, like, if they're not going to implement any of, change, like, let them fail, like, let them see how that works out for them, because you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, I have my own experience of the team that I've built and the opportunity, that Andy and I came together. Like, we've been working together for 9 years as co-founders, essentially, and we brought in our third co-founder, which is hard because we were like, this person has to be bring something new to the table that we don't already have, and that's gender or race aside, like, he brings different expertise, he brings different he's very highly educated, he's an Asian male, and yes, that didn't have anything to do with it, but he came from a different background and also understood how important it was to bring different voices to the table when we grew our team. And as a startup, it can be hard to open up your team to keep an open pool of candidates coming in, and I love what WeSolv is doing to make a difference there, because I think there is a problem with the way that we're gathering candidates a lot of times. Like, we're pulling candidates from our own network, from resources that we've been connected with, and sometimes those aren't the most diverse candidates. And you may not find the most excellent candidate if you don't have a large network to pull from. Like, if their experience was that all of the diverse people they've had on their team were unsuccessful, it's like, well, maybe they need to broaden that to a bigger pool of candidates. Like, those successful people are out there. It takes a lot of extra work sometimes to find them, and it's absolutely worth it because of the differences that they bring to the table, the background, experience, like, having them actually have a voice in the company too, I think is very important, because you can have a diverse team, but if you're not listening to what they're all saying, then that's not going to change anything. So I'm 100% in agreement with everything they said. Like, you've just got to find the right people, and sometimes it's a bigger pool of candidates. But I like 100% prepared to continue to grow our team in that way. It's hard for companies, but I think companies like myself and other founders in Chicago are starting to introduce that to the world. Like, we can show people that this is a successful company and this is how you do it.
I agree. I think Chicago's doing a great job.
We gotta keep working on it.
I want to move a little bit. This question is like, well, what can we do maybe, right? What are some ideas? How can we ideate together? And one of the things that a lot of, I would say, industries are doing are mandates, right? And so sometimes you can't just hope that people are going to, work on their own biases and work towards inclusion. Sometimes you have to mandate it, and it has to be part of their job. So we've seen mandates be affected in DEI progress. So for example, a couple of years ago, a lot of boards started requiring that a certain percentage of women and people of color have to be on that board, which created increased diversity. So my question is, do you think that creating industry mandates would be helpful and useful for diversifying access and opportunities? And any thoughts on what these mandates would look like in the venture ecosystem?
I don't think something like that would ever happen, but it would be great if it did. I think it's a double-edged sword, right? So everybody who, you hear about these mandates, or if anyone has ever been a benefit, just being, I remember getting into UCLA and somebody coming up to me, like, who was in all my classes, saying something like, oh man, you're lucky that you're Black, so that's why you got into UCLA. I'm like, you know how many times I beat you on all those tests? What are you talking about? So even when you are qualified, people are still going to think the reason, that you got something was because of a mandate or, affirmative action. But at the end of the day, I'd rather still get it and have the ability to then use that privilege and those resources to uplift the community and help more people who look like me follow. So definitely think that, having some sort of mandate would be helpful. While I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case for, like the government, institute something like that for the venture world, I think it's really important when organizations think about diversity, right? If it's really important to you, then it's going to be something you measure and something that you incentivize. Just like every other goal, right? You give bonuses based on sales and revenue numbers, whatever that goal might be. And if diversity is of value, then I think that organization should, act likewise in that sense.
Yeah, I think that
Mandates would be good. Whether they will happen or not is a question mark. I think the reality is that affirmative action has mostly only helped white women. And so not being explicit about diversity and really being thoughtful about diversity and the intersectionality and all of the many ways that identity shows up. We talk about it reach a lot, wanting leadership to reflect the incredible diversity of Chicago's neighborhoods, of this country, and communities of people in this country. And so I think investing and working with more folks like Reach Pathways, like WeSolv, who are about solving the talent gap. There's a lot of incredible talent out there, and there's a lot of opportunity out there, and there's a massive labor shortage coming. So being thoughtful now about how is talent coming in, where is it being accessed? There are people doing this work to connect diverse talent to opportunity and putting dollars to action.
And I thought a lot about this question since we last talked, and my thoughts about it are kind of all over the place. But my dad actually was part of an affirmative action initiative at his job when he first came to the U.S. He had no money and had no job, and really worked super hard to make money and start a family. He came from Mexico, and the company he works for now, they've been bought out, but it's IKEA. When he was first hired by, I think it was October, I don't know the name of it, but he would tell me the story of, he would have employees come up and be basically you have this job because you're Latino. And he would tell me that story, and I was just heartbroken. I was like, how could the things that you've all said today, it's just heartbreaking that people actually think that way. And that my dad felt that way about himself, was that he was only there because he was Latino, and that's just a terrible way for anyone to feel. And for a company to implement something like that and allow other people to think that way because that was enacted, that's the mindset we need to change, is the rest of the people thinking that it was only put in place to, force the problem or force a solution. And I know now that like that is 100% not the reason my dad was hired. Like he is still there 30 years later because he's an incredibly hard worker and very good at his job. And he's told me before, like he kind of had to work extra hard to prove that, which isn't fair. But I know that he is a hard worker no matter what. And I feel that way about some of the ways that my company talks about diversity is like, you could put on your, job application like DEI, diversity is important to us and blah, 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 but like, you're not doing anything, like, what does that even mean? Like, how are you actually making a difference? And for a startup, it is hard, like, do you invest in having, something actually in place or using special tools to make that happen? Or do you just really focus on it internally and make that a priority? And I think about it every single time that we're hiring. It's like we have limited resources as founders, so we really have to make the right choice every single time, and it costs us. But we can really make a difference by opening up that candidate pool and finding the right person. A diverse person is out there. We just have to find a bigger pool of candidates to find those good, excellent people. Because I've brought on many people on my team who are diverse and they were the right person for that job. Like, we just had to look a little harder sometimes, but they've come to us. Like, a lot of people on my team are people that the successful people on my team are people we've met through our network because we get out a lot, we talk to a lot of people and constantly building our network. Like, you do that, you will find good people. But the idea of like forcing it, I think that makes sense in a lot of ways, but it's the mindset that we have to change afterwards, that like they are there because they are a great, valuable, and important person.
Qualified and deserved.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I was taken back to 15 years ago when I started at my college. Someone actually came up to me on my second day and said, "Oh, you're the diversity hire," because I was one of the youngest people the college hired. Yeah. So that person got fired, by the way. So I have one question for each of you, and then we're going to close and open it up so we can have a larger discussion. I'm sure some of you have something to say. I want to start, and I created these specifically for individual, each of you. So Stella, I'm going to start with you. And I know you haven't even seen this one because you just opened it up, so I hope you can answer this. So Black women are starting businesses at much higher rates than any other demographic group in the U.S., but they are the least funded. And Black women have historically lacked access to capital, resources, access to networks when compared to other demographic groups. So as a Black woman who is both a founder and a funder, what message do you want to share with critics who believe that equity-based firms such as Fifth Star Funds are discriminatory and perpetuating reverse racism?
Spicy. I mean, honestly, it's laughable, but I mean, Black women are also the highest educated group of people across the board. So the percentage of Black women is higher than the percentage of white males, white women, Asian, any other group. I think, me personally, knowing the strengths of Black women and having Black women in my community and in my network, I see how we have unfortunately been forced to be scrappy or make something out of nothing, and I see that as a strength, and I see that as a reason why investors and companies should want Black women on their team and on their side. But I know that, because of everything that we've talked about, bias, all those things, that's not necessarily the case. And for folks who feel that that is reverse discrimination, I invite them to really just think more critically and deeply about why they consider that to be reverse racism. If they don't consider the years, and if we're talking about the US specifically, in over 400 years of privilege and resource and things that have been, systemically given certain groups advantages as not racism that needs to be reversed. I ask them that.
Thank you. Greg, I'm going to go to you. So as a white woman founder, how have you or do you use your racial privilege to help create more access and opportunities for racially minoritized people in the venture ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's within the work that we're doing organizationally and within Reach, that's a core part of our purpose as an organization, but within the ecosystem more broadly, a couple of things. One, I really intentionally, it's unusual for me to be the one on the panel because my co-founder is an incredible speaker. I'm the introvert, he's the extrovert. It makes sense, but also we should be centering Black and brown voices in this space and putting them first. And so I'm the backup and happy to be the backup. I also, I think that when I am in these spaces, it's important for me to say some of the things, like I should talk about the racial wealth gap or the impacts around affirmative action impacting white women. It comes off very differently with me versus my colleagues of color. And so I have a responsibility at times to be the one to say that.
Thank you. Lisa? Latin people account for about 60 million Americans, or 18.5% of the population currently, and that's actually growing drastically. So by 2050, 1 in every 4 Americans will be Hispanic. What do you think needs to happen in the VC funding ecosystem so that this space is more inclusive and welcoming to Latin and Hispanic founders and or VC employees?
Yeah, I have heard a lot of these statistics too, especially I was actually part of a program that Stanford offered for Latin business owners. I think it was like with over $1 million in revenue or something like that, or have raised money. And the people in the room, like, these are really amazing, incredible business owners that like, they're just crushing it. And they actually, Stanford is like, you know, the best business school in the world, but a lot of these people did not have the ability to go to Stanford for many reasons. But they're trying to change that by having a program that is targeted towards that group. And, you know, that's, I guess, more on on the founder side of things, but with investors, like, these are actually future investors as well, because they're making a lot of money. These business owners are like, some of them I'd be like, oh my God, I don't even know what $50 million is like. But like, how do we teach, and I think it was talked about earlier too, like, how do we teach building wealth through investing as another form of growing? And I think a lot of people just have never even heard that they could invest in startups. Like, I went to a talk earlier this week for angel investors, and like, there were so many women in the room, especially, who were like, yeah, I didn't know that I could do this, or that investing was an option for me, and like, I don't have a lot of money. But you can start with a small amount. Like the Josephine Collective we were just talking about, like, you can start with $1,000 to invest. And that alone has made me interested in investing. I know that there are more women and women of color or people in the Latino community that can do that, especially the people who are in this program with me in Stanford. Like, we just have to talk about it more and let people know it's really, you know, a matter of just starting with a small amount to get involved in that community, or just go to these events, you know, like, there are people in that room who maybe they don't have money to invest right now, but it gets them thinking about it and gets them part of that community. So having more events like that, like, hey, you're interested in investing, just show up, just talk to people. And I just like felt it in the room. I was like, we can make a big change here. We just do more events like this and invite more, like, if everyone brings another person with them every single time, that's going to build a community. And I think Chicago's a great place to start. Obviously other cities can do it as well, but just bring more voices to those events.
Thank you. What's the time? I don't know. Okay, so we have a little bit of time. I have 2 options you can answer, both for one. I definitely want you to try to answer the first question. So inclusion starts at the top, right? What we're really talking about here is how do we further and increase inclusion in this system so that there are more voices in the room, there are more power holders that look like someone outside of a white male, right? Because that's what we see most. And so those power holders are the ones who have the power to move things and to change things. So my question is, what do you think white men and other power holders need to do for us to see increased representation, increased funding, and shared success across historically underrepresented women and groups? If you had a magic wand and say, I want you to do this.
Hang out with my co-founder. He has naturally been a huge advocate for growing a diverse team, and he's a white male, but that's always been so important to him. And I think it's something, I don't know where he learned it from. He went to high school and college in a wealthy suburb of Chicago, but he's always felt like giving people who aren't like him opportunities is the way of the future and is meaningful to him. I think surrounding yourself with people who have those opinions, rub off on you a little bit. Like, get to know how people are actually making a change and how they're doing it. Just surround yourself with those people.
I would say put some skin in the game. I think there's so many people who think that, discrimination is bad, or, that, you shouldn't treat people a certain way because of their gender or their race. But there's not as many people who are willing to put some skin in the game to change that. So I would say to white men of various degrees of privilege, if they could put that privilege on the line when they see or have the ability to make a change and do something, that could move the needle in ways that, every other minority working diligently at moving the needle can't even achieve.
I think very often when we talk about affirmative action and DEI, there's this underlying assumption that means the people with privilege, white men, are giving up an opportunity to give someone else an opportunity. And I think try to reframe that a little bit to the more people who have an opportunity, the better off everyone is. I want my daughter to live in a world where the leadership reflects her and her community and the wider space that she is in, and not just one or two. And that means everyone will be better off because there's more people with more perspective making better decisions. And it's not about taking away from someone. And I married a white dude from the North Shore. I think there's so often this perception of us and them, and it's more about I want everyone to have opportunity. I want opportunity too. I want people of color and women of color to have the same opportunity. It's like that.
It is hard for some folks to say that they want to give that up, and I think until we can have those really, really difficult conversations, we're not going to see the needle move, and I think it's important to keep having those convos.
I want to speak a little bit to the founders or the potential investors who are out there that you can do it. Look for that role model who's doing it and is succeeding. There are really great people out there crushing it. I was just talking about Kristen Sande from Long Jump, as an example, when I found out that she was an investor and she's growing this giant company, she's a Latina founder who's raised a ton of money. I was like, I can do that. She's doing it. Why can't I do it? Just think within yourself that you can do more. You can be that successful person. I think we don't all give ourselves enough credit that there's someone like us out there who's crushing it, and you can too. It's a matter of putting yourself out there, advocate for yourself, and really believe that you can do it. A lot of people have overcome a lot of hurdles to get there. It's gonna be tough sometimes, but just believe in yourself. I know it's a little bit cheesy, but that's how I feel like I've gotten to where I am, is just keep pushing forward.
Not cheesy at all. Believe in yourself. So, thank you so much. Before we open it up, let's give our panelists a round of applause.